be brave. Have you ever been so scared to say something that your knees are shaking? So, this is what I was known for as a teenager. So one of the things that the church my dad served at the time did was have all the seniors have to preach a sermon on Youth Sunday. And so I had it all prepared, was really set to go. It sounded brilliant. No, it sounded like a teenager. And I got up in the pulpit and I read it from here up. You couldn't tell anything was wrong with me, but my knees were knocking so badly. And of course, the mean girls were behind me, the other seniors who were mean. And if you have never met Illinois mean girls, they're mean. Made sure that I knew that it didn't matter what I had said, my knees were knocking. Now the adults were like, you're gonna be just like your dad. I can tell, you've got it. But it didn't stop my knees from wanting to knock. And then I remember being at either the national youth event or the regional youth event, and we were trying to decide how to respond to, and I don't remember what conflict was going on back then. So this is the mid-'80s. It could have been South and Central America. It could have been something to do with the wall and all of the countries that were kept boxed in. But we had decided that we would have this resolution of peace. And all the Illinois group gathered together, and it was in a stairwell. Like, we were at the bottom of a stairwell. And as I was listening, they were all like, yeah, no, we don't support this. And so I'm like, oh no, I have to be courageous. I have to speak up. My 17-year-old self wasn't as outspoken as my 57-year-old self. But with my knees shaking, I talked to them about peace and about why the gospel calls us to preach peace with my knees shaking. So I wished at the time I had Sarah Bareilles to strengthen me or support me. I think Taylor Swift has a song too, but I'm old, so we have Sarah Bareilles, who sang, you could be amazing. You can turn a phrase into a weapon or a drug. You can be the outcast or be the backlash of someone's lack of love. Or you can start speaking up. Nothing's going to hurt you the way that words do when they settle beneath your skin. Kept on the inside, no sunlight. Sometimes the shadow wins. But I wonder what would happen if you say what you want to say and let the words fall out honestly. I want to see you be brave. I want to see you be brave. Can you imagine that your daughter has been ill? You've heard over and over again, every time you've gone to church, she's out of control. You need to do something. Can't you make your child behave? Can't you make her be quiet? Can't she sit still? Maybe you should leave. Your child is upsetting me. You've tried everything. Every herbal supplement, every meditation, every psychiatrist, psychologist, doctor, healer, teacher. You have changed your child's diet. No sugar, no wheat, more vegetables. You have exercised more. You are tired. You've had enough. Where can you turn for help, for hope, for comfort? And then you heard about him. You heard about him. But Jesus was hiding out. He didn't want to see anyone. He was tired. Everywhere he went, people needed him. Everywhere he went, People wanted something from him. They needed his healing touch. He wanted to be alone. He wanted to rest. He wanted to recharge his batteries, but he couldn't get away. As they tried to keep everybody out of the house for him, she comes in anyway. She comes in and falls to her knees. She begs him to heal her child, to make her daughter well. She falls to her knees, bowing down, praying that he who had done so much good could change the life of her daughter. An immigrant, a refugee. He says, I'm not here to help your people. I'm here to change the lives of my people. I'm here to save my people. It's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. Did that Holy One, this healer, call her a female dog? A little female dog? Yeah, that word. The one that popped into your head that you don't want me to say. That word. Is that what he said? Is that what he said to her? Did he call her a dog? Is he saying that she's not human? This man that she had heard about, who was supposed to embody compassion, was told that he was kind. How could he speak to her that way? How could he know her child? Crumbs from the table. Sir, even the dogs, or the little female dog, even the dogs get crumbs. Could she be brave? Could she speak out? Demand that he hear her, see her, help her, even while calling her name. How many hoops must she have jumped through? How many times did she have to give them the same documents? How many times did she have to tell the story? Why was it so hard? Why did people make it so difficult? Why did they see her, see them as less? She called out. That scorned mother held him accountable for his words, his promises. This little female dog made him actually think about what it means to love your neighbor. I mean, think about this. What did we just hear last week about Jesus? He said, there is nothing that can go into you, nothing, that can make you unworthy, that can make you unclean, that can defile you. And yet here in this story, what is he saying? He is saying, you aren't worthy. You aren't the people that I came to help. Now, here's what I know. Every pastor before me has told you that he didn't really mean it. He was just trying to prove what had happened in the previous paragraphs. That he didn't really mean those words that came out. But if we truly believe that Jesus was totally human, the incarnate of God, human on earth, being raised human means that you have all the things that make humans unkind to each other. You have the prejudice that come from your people. And those prejudices got to him that day. That day, whether it was because he was tired, whether he had had enough, whether he just really wanted to be alone, that day, Jesus wasn't kind. Jesus was downright mean. So, just to prove my point, I looked it up, and I tried to remember where I first heard this interpretation of the word dogs. And I will say that I probably read it from Will Gaffney, a professor in Texas. But I don't think I heard it first from her, because her first preaching of it was in 2012. And I'm sure I heard it in seminary. But here's what one of those scholarly papers says about the use of the word dog. Sorry, it's at the bottom of my list. So it's from a paper by Professor Alan H. Cadwallader, called When a Woman is a Dog, Ancient and Modern Ethology Meet the Syrophoenician Woman. So, when the term dog was used in Israel at that time, in the Middle Eastern area, the word dog was meant to impugn the ethnic or servile origins of an opponent. Secondly, it could be the reviling of the occupation of the opponent or his or her kin. It was censoring of an opponent for being a prostitute, brothel keeper, procurer of some other deviation from conventional sexual behavior, or deviating from or denigrating the gender of the opponent, either because she is a woman or because he behaves as a woman. He really did call her an unkind word. A word that we like to take out of the Bible because we don't want it to mean that. When we hear this story, we're like, oh, it's our dog. It's like Leo and Thelma's dog, right? That cute little bundle of fluff that's just running under the table, ready for anything you hand them. That's not what dogs were in Palestine, in Israel at that time. Dogs were kept out of the house, like my grandmother would never let an animal in the house. You did not do that. Because the dogs were scavengers. Fia was telling me a story about the pastor who collected all the cats and dogs in his community. That people would feed them outside. That's what dogs and cats were kept in this area. They weren't inside as household pets to love on. They were scavengers out of doors who fought for any piece of food they could get. So to call someone a dog wasn't to picture cute and fluffy. It was to picture annoying. It was to see them as unworthy. And he called her a dog. And she, instead of arguing with him about descriptors, says, but aren't I worthy of even a crumb? Isn't my daughter worthy of even a crumb? How many of you would have been brave enough to do that? How many of you, if you heard that the Messiah was in town and was healing people, had set out to heal a friend, a family member, a child, and when you got there, the Messiah, the one anointed by God, calls you a dog? What would you do? Now, knowing me, because I have mixed feelings about confrontation, like I can stand up for someone else, but can't stand up for myself, I would have probably turned tail and run out that door, never to be seen again in that area. She was brave. She didn't let those words stick. She was fighting for her daughter, and she spoke out. She was brave. Can you make us brave? As I was thinking about this week, I wanted to share stories of people being brave, of breaking through the silence, of speaking when it was difficult. So how many of you know when the women's movement started and how it started? It started because some of the to-be suffragettes soon went to England, to London, to the Missionary Society to advocate for abolition, the freedom of slaves. And when they arrived there, they were not allowed in the building because they were female. They were not allowed to say what they thought. They were not allowed to speak. And they were annoyed. They were angry. And it changed Elizabeth Cady Stanton and the others with her so that when they came back to the United States, they not only spoke out for abolition, they started speaking out for themselves. And into that mix comes one of the people that we in the United Church of Christ like to proclaim as our own, even though we did her wrong. Antoinette Brown, the first woman to be ordained as a pastor by the United Church of Christ, but the Congregational Church at the time. Antoinette Brown knew that she should be a pastor, wanted to be a pastor, was called to be a pastor, and so she went to school, but they wouldn't allow her in the doors. But she kept at it until she got the education she wanted, and when she wanted to become a pastor and all the doors kept slamming in her face, she kept trying until she found a church that would accept her. But turns out we accepted her enough to ordain her, but not to actually let her be a pastor of a congregation. So she had to keep fighting to find a church that would accept her and let her be a pastor. She fought from those late 1800s until the year before her death for changes, for civil rights, for women to have rights. She advocated for the suffragettes, advocated for women to have the right to vote. And the year before she died, the amendment was passed, and so in her last year of life, she was actually able to vote for the very first time. She didn't remain silent every time someone told her no. And during that time, there was a woman who wrote a poem, often attributed it to Abraham Lincoln, but it wasn't. It was a woman. And in this poem she said, "To sin by silence when we should protest makes cowards out of men." Those words, to sin by silence when we should protest makes cowards out of men. Those words, written in World War I-ish times, made their way to Rachel Carson. Her friend, Dorothy Freeman, was encouraging her during this time. They were writing letters back and forth as Carson had written her very first book, telling about the pollution that was killing her favorite waterway. As she spoke about what it was like when she was young and flowing free and how it was dying now, her friend, Dorothy, sent her those words as she was worried that speaking up would mean the end of her career. To sin by silence when we should protest makes cowards of men. Those words translated into Carson saying, "Knowing what I do, there would be no future peace for me if I kept silent." That Rachel Carson spoke out about the pollution impacting the world. She set the environmental movement on its course, helped lead us to have the Clean Air and Water Act by showing us the causes, the direct correlations from pollution to the destruction of the habitat. She spoke out and was brave. Can you be brave? Can you speak out even when it's hard, even when your knees are knocking, even when it feels like it's too difficult? Can you speak out your faith that calls us to action? Can you speak out? Can you be brave? I thought about this as I've told you my Twitter feed is a mess. It's either how the environment is falling apart or what is happening in Gaza. Which means it's horrible and I should only look at it once a day. But this week, one of the last journalists in Gaza for Al Jazeera was killed. And so on the feed of the one last journalist who's left in northern Gaza, he pays tribute to his friend. Can you imagine, as you have watched, the details are a little iffy because we don't know true numbers, between 70 and 170 journalists have been killed in Gaza. To continue to speak out. The post before that on his feed was of a mother tracing the face of her daughter before she buried her, tracing every feature. He shared with the world the pain of this mother and this daughter. The pain as the world watches a city, those buildings that used to be multi-stories high, that are all rubble now. He shares his words, his stories, knowing that he's one of the last Al Jazeera reporters in Gaza. He shares the news because someone has to tell the words. Someone has to speak. Someone has to be brave. Will you be brave? When you are faced with that point where your knees are knocking, but you know that what is happening is wrong, will you be brave? When you are faced with people calling you names, will you challenge them to open up the world and expand the mission? Will you be brave? Will you say, even the dogs under your feet deserve the crumbs from the table? Amen.